It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Joining us now, we have Congressman Bruce Westerman on the line. Bruce, it's always good to have you on, sir. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, good to be with you, Paul. I didn't hear the Johnny Cash music this morning.
Well, I know. We were kind of already a little bit into the segment, but hey, we'll get you some on the way out of the segment. How about that?
That'll work. I hear the legislature may put Johnny Cash's statue up here in the Capitol.
Boy, I think that's that would be amazing, and that's what I want to happen. But I don't know. I actually haven't heard an update on that in a while. Because
I just heard a little bit about it a while back, but not anything recently.
Yeah, we get two, right? And right now, I don't think anybody even remembers the people that are up there now. So that'll be interesting to see what happens.
I know because I give Capitol tours, but I bet most Arkansans don't know.
Well, so Congressman Westerman, let's get your thoughts on everything that's going on right now with the budget deal. The president now saying that he's going to sign it and avert a government shutdown. Leader McConnell in the Senate saying that he'll also declare a national emergency. What are your thoughts on everything? What's the environment up there right now?
Well, it's like deja vu all over again. We've got a spending bill. Here we're middle of February, dealing with a spending bill that should have been passed last September. And I think people forget that when we get into these situations that seem to be the normal rather than the oddity anymore. And it's why I continue to harp on the fact that we've got to get those spending bills done on time so that we don't get in these situations. I wrote an op-ed a couple of weeks ago about this, but what happens, Paul, is we've got 12 spending bills. Everybody knows right now that the federal budget runs out September 30th of 2019. We should be working on those appropriation bills, getting them through the House and through the Senate. You get to debate them, you get to offer amendments, and you obviously don't get everything you want on those, but at least they go through the process, and you can do the responsible thing and fund the government at the end of the day. What has happened, though, is the senators, Democratic senators who are in the minority now, know that they can't even bring one of those bills up for a vote without cloture. So we'll pass the bills in the House, get them over to the Senate, and they'll just sit there. This past year, we actually got 3/4 of the spending approved in September, and which left us, 25%, which this bill yesterday was about $330 billion was what was left to approve. But that could have been done last September, but for political purposes, the senators wouldn't allow cloture on the bill. So you go into a continuing resolution, and then it gets to an expiration date, and you go into another continuing resolution. And then here we are, middle of February, and we get a bill that was released at, I think, 1 a.m. in the morning, and the Senate voted on it yesterday, and then we voted on it last night. So a 1,200-page bill with no time to read it, but it's more the principle of the way we're doing business up here. And now we've put the president in a position where he's got a responsibility to, there's a commander-in-chief of the chief person responsible for our security, of not having the funds from Congress to do what he believes is needed to keep our country secure. So now you're getting into constitutional issues on whether he can take money that's been appropriated for one thing, declare an emergency, and use it for another thing. It's not a good situation. I don't think it's the way our founders intended for the government to be operated. No,
and yet I think there's, on our side, there's a lot of support, I think, for the president to just build the wall. I mean, do the thing, take the money from the Pentagon, do whatever, use the military, and get it done. And then, of course, a lot of people are wondering, okay, well, what kind of precedent does that set? But I mean, there is a national emergency law, back in the 70s, where presidents can declare national emergencies. Obviously, it's going to be challenged in court. But this is what I've been saying, Congressman Westerman, is that I do believe it is a crisis. I do believe it rises to the level of an emergency. And there's some people that don't, but that's just because they don't realize, just the media has not been reporting the crisis at the border for decades. And, you know, when you take into account the human trafficking, the sex trafficking that's going on, that in and of itself should spark bipartisan unions about trying to stop this.
You know, we passed bills in Congress and gloat about them, about preventing human trafficking. And the one thing we could do to probably affect human trafficking as much as anything would be to get better security along the border. And then the drug problem is, I think people are starting to understand how bad it is, but I don't think people really have got their hands around how horrible fentanyl is. And most everybody, if you'll start talking to people, everybody knows someone who's died of an opiate overdose, or is in a rehab program, or has a messed up life because of opiates. And the amount of fentanyl that is coming across the southern border is astonishing. I mean, it's enough lethal doses to kill our population several times over. Mm-hmm. And it just is continuing to grow. And it drives me crazy when people say we're seizing these drugs at the designated border crossings. Well, no duh, because you've got dogs there and you've got scanners and you're able to detect them. But when somebody's in the middle of nowhere walking across the border with nothing deterring them, you're not going to catch them and apprehend drugs there. So it's there's not a lot of common sense going into what being portrayed in the media along the southern border.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine, a colonel, a couple days ago, and he was saying that this fentanyl is, you know, it's pretty much close to a biological weapon in terms of, you know, I've read stories where SWAT teams go in to make a bust, and they end up being hospitalized because of exposure, meaning they're just breathing the air where the fentanyl is, and you know, it's like airborne, and they have to go to the hospital. I mean, that's crazy.
And I've heard that where they're cooking meth. Now, fentanyl, you 2 milligrams is a lethal dose. You inhale that, and you're probably not going to make it. You can get too much of it on your skin, and it'll take you out. And these drug cartels are sprinkling it on the heroin to make the heroin more addictive. And, you know, a lot of these, this illegal fentanyl is being made in China, and I don't know if you saw this, but the Chinese government basically said they were issuing the death penalty for anybody caught making fentanyl over there.
Okay.
That's their public policy. But it's being made in China and shipped in to the U.S. But it's a epidemic. It's doing great harm to our country, and it is a national security issue. Absolutely.
I mean, I really do think just the southern border. You know, I with what's going on, Bruce, in New York, what's going on in Virginia when it comes to, you know, pro-life issues. You know, I think the liberal progressive guy Bill Maher, you know, he said, trying to make fun of Republicans, that our issues are the wall and the womb. But you know, I tend to agree with him, but I think those issues at this point we've gotten so far away from. Well, we can't even really talk about esoteric conservative governance. We have to talk about just basic tenets of civilization, protecting life, and a nation doing what it can to ensure that the most vulnerable, the unborn, are allowed to have a chance at living. And once they're here, that the nation itself would not abdicate its responsibility to control who comes and goes from a sovereign country. And so, yeah, right. I mean, those are really big Republican issues right now because the other side is against them.
Yeah, I hope we're seeing the dying gasp of this pro-death movement, this abortion movement. I think the science is proving out with the technology that we got that people understand that there's life in the womb. And, you know, this guy from Virginia saying, you know, let the child be born and the mother can have a little bit of time to figure out if she wants to keep the baby or not. That's straight up infanticide. There's no other way to categorize that. And saying you can take the life of a baby, you know, seconds or minutes before that baby's going to be born, is it's embarrassing to me that that's happening in this country.
Yeah.
You go to countries that we think are horrible on human rights, and a lot of them have stricter abortion laws than we have, or than that's being proposed by some of these folks in New York and Virginia.
So last week, we didn't get to talk to you about last week's State of the Union address, but what were your thoughts on it?
I thought it was a great address. I thought the president did an excellent job, and I thought he talked about issues that needed to be covered. I've not been to that many State of the Union addresses, but it was by far the best one I've been to, and I think it was very well received. I really appreciated the way he commemorized the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and he had the three gentlemen there who were on the beach at D-Day. He started the speech with that, talking about what real greatness is, and then at the end he came back with the Holocaust survivor and worked that back in. And one of those gentlemen who had landed on D-Day actually had helped free that Holocaust survivor from Dachau. It was a very emotional moment, reflective time to think about just how great this country really is, and the accomplishments. Seeing the astronaut there who had
Buzz Aldrin,
been to the moon. Buzz Aldrin. I kept thinking Buzz Lightyear, but Buzz Aldrin.
Hey, well, we're talking with
I've met him a couple of times.
We're talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman on the State of the Union, though. I thought it was a well-written speech, and it was delivered good too. But he really did a good job of kind of putting the Democrats, this vicious opposition. He talked about the realities of Venezuela right before he condemned socialism. He talked about paid leave, whether you support paid leave or not, but he mentioned specifically children and how parents need to bond with their precious children, and that's why paid leave is important in this country. And he does that right before he talks about abortion. So he gets the Democrats, it's like, yeah, paid leave, parents and their kids. Oh, by the way, kids are also important when they're in the womb. And then on the illegal immigration subject, right before he talked about illegal immigration in the border, Congressman Westerman, he talked about how they had just all come together for criminal justice reform. So it's like, here's a positive. Right. We came together and solved it, and we need to come together and solve this again. Of course, that doesn't appear to be what they're doing, but I just thought it was really a very well-written speech.
I do too, and I think he played them in his hand there. The only time that all the women in white stood up and clapped was when they were clapping for themselves, based on his congratulations to him for having more women in Congress than ever before. They couldn't clap for World War II veterans. They couldn't clap for America, but they could stand up and clap for themselves. And I found it ironic that the person they loathed the most had them up clapping and cheering and chanting USA.
Yeah. I thought that was very interesting as well. Generally, I also thought...
You brought up...
go ahead.
Well, you brought up the president's comments on life, and that's probably the strongest words I've ever heard from a president that I can remember on the sanctity of life. And to me, that was a highlight of his speech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how all children reflect the holy image of God. I agree. I don't think I've ever heard that from a president. Yeah.
There's probably a lot of them that have believed that in the past, and it was just kind of understood in society, I think. But I'm glad that he reminded us of that and reminded the nation and the world of that in the State of the Union.
Congressman Bruce Westerman, I appreciate the work you're doing, sir, and it's always a pleasure to have you on the program, and we'll talk to you again soon, okay? Yeah,
wait till you hear about the new Green Deal. Oh, my goodness.
Right. Yeah, that's a gift. Yeah. I think that's a gift to Republicans, actually.
Yeah, it's actually scary because they're moving the bar so far that it's going to make things that would have seemed nuts not quite as nutty, because that is so nutty.
Yeah, that's a good
but-
point. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we appreciate it,
All
sir.
right, I hear a little Johnny Cash coming in the background.
Yeah, we're full circle. All right, Congressman Bruce Westerman, you be safe. Folks, we're going to take a break.